So we're here to take a look at the penultimate episode of Season 9 of The Walking Dead before the mid-season break, Stradivarius. First, kudos to Michael Cudlitz, Abraham, who came back to direct this episode. There's something about past cast members coming back and directing a lot of the shows I've been watching. They really, really do a great job. And Cudlitz deserves it for this one because he just gets a sense of the characters, the tone, and the pacing. And let me just say, one of the best sounding soundtracks for an episode of not just The Walking Dead, but of a series I've seen in a while. So I definitely, create a little playlist out of that. But I got my list ready. I want to jump in. I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was a necessary dialing back. I thought it gave us some good separate storylines that converged properly towards the end. But most of all, I think the episode gave us a really great sense of dread, which I think has been missing for a while. We had that kind of dread leading up to the whole, is Glenn and someone else going to get killed with Negan? But this is just a sense of dread across the board for all the communities. And again, I like where it's building as we're getting ready to head into next week's mid-season finale. But a couple of things I want to touch upon that I really liked. Rosita, the opening, very Blair Witch-like. I thought was just a really great opening sequence. I thought it really set a tone for where I'm feeling the season's going to be going with the Whisperers. So kudos for that. The Daryl, Carol, Henry dynamic. Again, I'm going to say I'm someone who never bought into the whole Daryl, Carol, they should be together thing. I always brought it as an older sister, younger brother situation. And I think this one sells it even more. It was nice and it was sweet, the haircutting scene, but I never saw anything romantic or sexual about it. It seemed very loving, and it felt like Carol, as the big sister, was making sure she was getting her two little brothers to start working together. And I even really love the dynamic between Daryl and Henry. I think that's something very interesting we can start seeing moving forward. It's the family dynamic across the board, and the way Henry speaks to Daryl and isn't afraid of him, but also you can tell has a cautious admiration for him. I thought that really, really played out nicely. Michonne and Siddiq, that's interesting. Some people online were talking about it from a romantic standpoint. I don't know if the audience is going to accept that, but I really liked the way they communicate and speak with one another, and the fact that you can tell Michonne holds Siddiq in a level of respect, because Siddiq, even though cautious, seems to be for Michonne what Jesus was for Maggie for a long time. We're going to get to Maggie in a minute. The survivors, couple problems here. The Benny thing, which I guess I heard wrong because I keep calling him Benny, but it's Bernie. I never bought into that. I just thought that was a kind of a forced thing. Magna, the character, I think it's time we move on now, and I want to see her more as a leader, less as somebody who keeps wanting to drag the group down for her personal stuff. And the whole thing with keeping them the weapons away from them for so long, not sure I really bought into that too. But again, I think that kind of plays into what happened in the past 6 years, because that thing with the X's that now Daryl and Michonne both have, I think is fascinating, and I'm really curious to see. I think it'd be very interesting if at some point if we see that Negan has that X on his back too. There is a backstory situation waiting to happen there. Jesus and Tara, I love the way the Hilltop seems more like the realistic community. Somewhere between the Sanctuary and between Alexandria. And I really like the Tara-Jesus dynamic, but Jesus is not made to be an administrator. That's just not his thing. He's out there to be an adventurer, which is why he's out meeting with Aaron. And I love them. They have the possibility of being the power couple of this season, but I also love their dynamic and this idea of we need to meet clandestinely because we might be the only ones that can get the communities to work back together. I mean, they're so separate, Michonne doesn't even know that Maggie's gone. That scene where they get startled and go to find Rosita, again, very effective in moving everything forward. I really appreciated that. I think we're all stressing the Daryl Henry dog scene. Again, after what happened with King Ezekiel, I think we need to have a moratorium on animals getting hurt in the show. Because I'm telling you, if something happened to dog, I think all of social media was going to collectively riot. It was not going to be pretty. I think that at this point, they could take Rick Grimes dying more than they could Daryl's dog. The scene between Luke and Michonne, the art, I wasn't sure where it was going, but again, I give Dan Fogler a lot of credit. He really sold it in that explanation of why art was important, and I love the fact that it even got Michonne to stop. Because Michonne was ready to cut that thing down realistically, but she didn't, and I loved and appreciated that scene, that moment of pause and grace. Loved seeing the gang getting back together, and it seemed natural. Having everybody converge at the Hilltop, knowing full well the Michonne's on her way. I just thought it really served the show very well, and getting all these separate storylines converging because, let's face it, they're going to need to work together when the Whisperers are there, but they're not going to be able to work together with everyone because of the Maggie mystery. We know she's with Georgie. We know she's left. We know she communicates via letters. Something horrible went down in the past several years. I don't know if it has to do with the exes, but I love the way they're just giving us little bits of Maggie backstory without giving us everything. And I'm also wondering if that's somehow indicative upon how they're viewing the contract negotiations with Lauren Cohan, because this idea of like, well, Maggie just left, didn't tell anybody, left everything in Jesus' hands. I'm hoping I'm not reading too much into this, but I know a lot of people online were talking about how they expected there to be more done about Lauren Cohan leaving. Now, granted, she can always come back depending on how Whiskey Cavalier does, but I thought that was very interesting. In fact, that was one of many interesting things in this episode, again, which I think positioned us very well going into the mid-season finale, which I think is, well, as they're saying, is going to be righteously insane.